All right, I suppose I'll start. My name is Katie Calder, and I am one of the undergraduate academic advisors in biological sciences in the College of Arts and Sciences.
I'm Megan Stanley. I am also an advisor in biological sciences. And I'm excited to talk with everybody today about flipped advising. We're hoping the goal for the presentation is to be able to kind of engage with what you want to really know about with this practice. So I'm excited to get to know y'all more soon.
My name is Alexa Dean. I advise for the School of the Earth, Ocean, Environment, Math, and Statistics. And I'm also very excited to chat with y'all today.
And my name is Sabrina McClure. I'm advising in the College of Information and Communications.
All right, let's get this party started. So as you can see here, we're talking about flip turning, advising upside down. I always have to use this visual because it cracks me up, and I'm a 90s baby. So this picture here is probably what really got me started with flipped advising. I'm part of a Facebook group called Humans of Higher Education, and I saw this one day, and Facebook showed me, the top comment, and that comment really spoke to my soul, which is you poorly explain what you do for a living, and it's email students information they never read. And I'm sure many of you can relate to this because that is absolutely what it feels like a lot of the time when we're trying to get students even just to schedule their advising appointments with us, but also when they ask us questions. I don't know how many of you have experienced this. I certainly have, when you answer a question via email and then you get the same question immediately right back. And then you have to try and re-explain yourself in a way that they will hopefully not only understand, but read. So this is one of those things that really got me thinking, how can I make this easier, not only on me, but also on the student? So how can I get them to find this information or learn this information in a way that I don't have to consistently send it to them? And so that was kind of the start of it all.
So we're going to kind of jump into what flipped advising means to you, and we're intentionally doing this before we're giving you a definition because we're hoping that you'll kind of get an idea of how we've all been practicing flipped advising before really calling it that. So just as an idea, you were interested in this session, we had a little blurb about it. What are some folks' ideas on what flipped advising is, and maybe even how you're implementing it already in your practice? Feel free to either use the chat or you can unmute. I'm a big fan of participation, so whatever you're comfortable with.
I would say it's more the student in charge of their own advising experience than the advisor. So preparing in a way to get the student to come to you a little bit more than you come to them.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome definition. Recognizing that we want the student to have their questions prepared, be aware of what's going on ahead of time and coming in with some knowledge base is really great. Yes. Anyone else have any different options or ideas of what flipped advising is or how they're doing it in their practice?
Hi, this is Christina Hallowell, and very much thanks to one of your panel members, Ms. Sabrina. I use a Microsoft form with very specific questions that include having them do research to be able to answer the questions. And to me, that helps with that flipped advising piece where they're not only prepared, but they're educated on what they're going to be experiencing in that appointment.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yes, we think being able to have that knowledge and prep ahead of time where they're discovering answers instead of being provided answers as students is one of the ways that we're helping them to critically think and learn as opposed to just, giving an answer. So awesome. Thank you. Anyone else? Well, we wrote down a couple of things as a team as well. We were wanting to make sure that, we want to focus on accountability, student self-awareness and independence, that critical thinking skills. So, thank you for sharing your definitions. I think those were both spot on. So we wanted to talk about some different goals of flipped advising a little bit more formally as well. Thanks to Katie for doing this research. When she first got this idea of flipped advising, went to a conference, really learned and kind of adapted the practice. And that's how we got our awesome practice here in biological sciences. But Katie did some research, saw some people that did, further research and talked about the core idea of flipped advising. So having this be an instructional approach, maybe teacher created videos, maybe interactive lessons, something in a way that students are accessing information at home before coming into the meeting. Also goals of making sure that the advising season for the advisor is helping students understand information instead of just giving a general understanding. We want students to really be able to make meaning of what their practice is doing. So thanks to Tucker and Steele for that research as well.
Okay, so we get into the big question of why. Now, why would we do this? So advisor caseloads is definitely one of those things. I know in biology we've kind of fluctuated here depending on how many advisors we have, between having like over 300 and under 300, and it can be tough to keep things separate. So advisor caseloads are definitely one of the big reasons for us, because we don't want to have to be answering the same question for 300 students every single time they have that question. But also time and appointments specifically, where we want to make sure we're helping them plan their courses, and we want to make sure we're helping with curriculum and everything. But there's also so many other things that we're here to help with that we really want to make sure we have enough time for, where a lot of those curricular questions can very easily be answered through those students doing some research of their own prior to the appointment. Also just empower students to take control of their own advisement, their own planning, and makes them feel better when they come into these appointments, that they're already prepared, they already know the things that they want to talk about, and then we have the time to cover all of those things in one appointment, as opposed to them having to try and reach us in the midst of advising and get little bits of answers from us time and time again, where we're able to really sit down and have that good conversation, and they feel empowered with their own knowledge and understanding of everything. Additionally, what the point is. So the point really for us became making sure our students were aware of all of those little details that are easily found through research, through looking at our bulletin website, our course catalog, all of that information that students have readily available at the tips of their fingers basically at all times. So instead of being able to only answer what's the difference between this class and this class, or where can I find a transcript, things that can very easily be done through honestly just hopping on our school website, typing it in the search bar. We want to make sure we have the time for those more in-depth questions, those long-term complex needs that our students are going to have for us when we meet with them, talking about graduation timelines, and actually being able to work with them on planning those timelines, as opposed to saying, well, here's a list, make that list, and then you can figure it out, because I don't have time for that. We're able to actually take those things into account, their career choices, the things that will help them move towards those careers, while we're able to make those decisions in college about courses or involvement on campus. So that's really the point, is to make this a much more holistic process, but also to empower the students.
So we want to, again, ask you all, even if you don't feel like sharing, that's totally okay. But as you're attending this presentation, we do want to be sure that we're using your time intentionally. So think to yourself, what is your flipped advising goal? Again, if you do want to share that in the chat or by unmuting, we would love that. Kind of to frame this question a little bit more, we want to know what you're really wanting to overcome with flipped advising. Do you feel like you don't have time to really interact with your students, and you want to interact with them deeper? So maybe giving them some information beforehand will help with that. Do you want to help students understand campus involvement and maybe don't have time in your meeting depending on your curriculum? What about student skill building? How are we helping them build that? So all of these questions more, I'm sure. Think about that. Again, if you want to share, please feel free. I see one in the chat. I cannot get to the chat. Oh, there it is. Okay. I love it as we have reclaimed so much more of my time and have had a few appointments run over. Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Anyone else want to share a goal that they're thinking about? Oh, I see some typing.
I'll talk while there's a couple typing. I think for me, I mean, you know, my role is with training is to allow you all to share so we can build some sort of repository so that other advisors can start using this. Like Christina was able to start using some of these and she's seen the benefit of it. And so that as we continue to use it, as different pockets of departments continue to use it, it's something that can be spread out to others. Because I know, you know, I've advised in now 4 different colleges, and doing it in biology where we had this flipped advising was so helpful for me learning. It was good. I mean, I think this is even a learning tool, training tool for advisors, for yourself, but also training tool for students. It just made a difference in what you can see the students get out of the appointments are so important.
I agree. I had that same feeling because Jane was advising for the position I was in before I got into that position. So I took over her students, and I think the flipped advising tool we have in biology, Katie will talk about it here momentarily. It was really beneficial for me to learn the ins and outs as an advisor as well. Christina shares critical thinking and decision-making skills and prompting conversation, buy-in from students as opposed to staring and nodding. Yes, that stare and nod sometimes is painful. We want to see that our students are engaged. So I think being able to give them the skills to do that, especially after the past 2 years of COVID, we need to really be intentional about rebuilding those skills. Thank you all for sharing so far. I know we've got a couple more typing. Anyone else wanting to share? Lucille says it helps build resiliency for students. Absolutely. The research before the meeting gives my students understanding that there is flexibility, even if they aren't able to get into the class they want to get into. Yes, I think that one is super significant, helping them understand that you're on track, even if you're not doing the exact same thing your major map says or the same thing your friend or roommate is doing. There is flexibility for sure. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing so far. All right, go.
I think we had for this slide, we also wanted to just provide some of the things that we were each thinking about as we developed our personal practice within, you know, the greater scope of flipped advising. So when we kind of all first came together, these were some of the things we were thinking about to find a starting point. So feel free to share with these as well. These are just some more examples of what to be thinking about as you might begin thinking for yourself, where you might want to be starting and what goals you might have. But common things to be trying to answer here: what questions are you getting most often? So if you're finding that you're repeating yourself all day long, you've got, 8 or 10 appointments and it's the same routine every time. And we're all trying, I think, to make the students feel like an individual and really cater the appointment to their needs and what their goals are and where they're trying to end up or get, or how they're getting involved on campus. All these things that we can make personal. But I know for me, at the beginning, it was like, I feel like a robot and I just feel like a body in space, and I have a lot more to offer. And I think the students would too, if they were prepared, like we've mentioned, with the things that are available to them. And then we're dedicating the time in the appointment to find those connecting points, get that individual support so that they can build and have a more well-rounded, involved experience. So again, evaluating, like, what are you talking about in your appointments? Maybe what are you not getting to that you would hope to get to? This is another good one. What kind of follow-up emails are you getting from students about either information that you didn't cover? So they, post-appointment have done some reflecting or thinking about the information that was explored and presented and realized they had, follow-up A, B, and C. But if they had kind of started with the things that were available to them, maybe you could have gotten to A, B, and C during the appointment. Or what are you repeating in an email that maybe you discussed? So if you have this material readily accessible or are building that culture of student accountability where they're looking for the information or you've given them the support, the independence to find the answers, would that benefit you or your students in some way? I went through that one, sorry. What do you think your students need from you that you might not have time to? And then also just trying to, for your own personal reflection, like what are you doing right now? I think the four of us have also several times discussed like, gosh, I was doing a flipped something, even though I didn't know that that was necessarily what it was called. So I know I attended Katie's training, one of the first ones she did, and I was like, well, wait a minute. I think like if I look at the definition, mine doesn't look like hers, but I'm doing that anyway. So give yourself some credit and praise that you're probably doing something in this way and maybe just not using this language to frame it. But we're hoping that today you can either feel empowered to get started on one little piece or recognize that you are already doing that and be thinking about how you want to continue to develop it.
So as we continue this question, thinking about what can flipped advising look like Sabrina just said, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can approach this. So that's what we're going to share out in the next several slides. Katie will be talking about biological sciences. Sabrina will be talking about different practices she's used as she's worked in different spaces as an advisor, and then Alexa as well covering the majors that she oversees. So a couple things we wanted to kind of note just out loud was that we want this space to be something that you all can take the time to really think about what'll work for you. So you're not going to necessarily walk away from this presentation with, here's a form and a presentation and what you have to do to follow these steps to be successful at flipped advising, because ultimately it's up to your style and your approach. But we do want to talk again about the ways that different advisors have been successful in different spaces. So as you think about what we're saying, take that lens of your current department, your current needs, your student caseload, all of those things, and see what'll work for you.
All right, so we can start off with me in biological sciences. So I've been in biology since spring of 2019. And so I went through about a year's worth of advising with no flipped advising model and saw what that looked like. And then it was essentially the summer after my first year, and I attended a NACADA tutorial online, obviously, because we were in the pandemic at that point. And it was about flipped advising, and it all clicked in my head. It all made sense. So that summer and fall, I harangued my fellow advisors in my department into helping me build our advising model with a flipped advising model. And it has changed many times since we very first began it. But here's a little sort of a preview, I guess, basically. So our plan, we built an organization in Blackboard for all of our students, which are working with the undergrad advisors, and there's about 1,000 of them because we are in one of the largest majors, so we have lots of students. There are 4 undergrad advisors currently, and we each have a caseload anywhere from 200 to 300-ish, kind of depending on the semester. So we started with some modules, basically breaking them down in a timeline. So we've got an orientation module and then a module for each semester that they're with us. And we have them for four semesters or their first 2 years, some of them a little longer. But essentially, so we've got essentially 5 modules that we've got our students working with. They go everywhere from kind of the very beginning with orientation to like understanding things like degree works and like those very basic things that they're going to need for advising, like tools getting in, all the way up to like registration resources, curriculum planning. We have a whole section on campus resources, withdrawal resources. So we've got lots of resources in there, in short. We've got videos that show, some of them are how-to videos. A lot of them, the UAC already has a ton of really great videos for us to use, and we've got a lot of those incorporated. But we made several just because the video format is going to work a lot better for some of our students because it's a little more interactive, a little more fun to pay attention to than just having to read something, which is what we're trying to get away from, obviously. So we've got like frequently asked question sheets. There's like a Cosmo quiz for withdrawal that I made. That's what we call Cosmo quiz, but it's like if then you do this. and lots of links to plenty of resources all across campus. And then the way that we're ensuring their completion of these modules is we require a submission for them before they come to advisement. So depending on the semester, it may be a quiz on curriculum, and then we ask them to submit their course list that they are thinking they might take for the upcoming semester. So that's really what our freshmen do, because we really want them to understand the core curriculum, essentially at its most basic, and then we also want them to look into classes and start kind of planning early, because they'll be using those skills continuously for their next 8 semesters or 7 semesters after the first one. But we do require them to complete that before they come to their advising appointment with us. So why we used a learning management system, I did all of this research, but a lot of it is obviously the generation of students that we're working with, particularly with our freshmen and our sophomores. Most of us have freshmen in the undergrad advising, so it's kind of, we're having to deal with keeping up with the technology and making sure that we're meeting them where they are, basically. We want them to get quick information. We want them to synthesize that information. A lot of them are not going to read it, so that's why we thought videos, and that's really easy to include all of those things in a learning management system. It's also really easy to organize. All of their classes are already housed in Blackboard. They are parts of several organizations. I know we already have another biology undergrad organization that our students are a part of. So it was a really easy transition for our students specifically. Obviously, it was a little bit of a learning curve for us to get into, but really easy because it's right where our students already have to access things constantly. You can send lots of information through it without having to go just through email, and it goes straight to their email, but also in Blackboard. So we're trying to make sure we're hitting them in multiple spaces, but it's also kind of where they're already existing. So lots of good things there. This is what the Blackboard kind of home landing page looks like for them. So since we do have 2 years worth of students, they're starting at different points. So we have to make that very clear. And that's what this whole first page is basically explaining, is why they need to do it, what they need to do, and where they need to start. So a lot of ours who started with us last year, hopefully they're fairly used to it and they see their semester 3 module and they know that's what they need to do. For our new freshmen, or our first semester students who are transfers, they need to know, okay, well, which module do I need to do? Technically, I'm a sophomore. Should I do the 3rd semester? No, we want you to start the 1st semester because you're still going to be with us for that time, and we want you to make sure you're starting from the beginning with all of that really good information. But that basically explains it. And then we kind of limit, because we do obviously have our semesters 2 and 4, and they're not on there right now because this is what it looks like this current fall. And then come the spring, we'll hide these modules so that our students will just know to do their other modules. Some screenshots from one of the videos that we have on curriculum. So we made several videos. There's ones on email etiquette. We have multiple ones on curriculum. There's ones on pre-professional resources because we have lots of pre-med and pre-health students in our major. So we really picked and chose the things that were most important for our students to know, the things that they really needed to understand, that we got the most questions about, and we made those things the more interactive information in our modules.
Cool. So I'll be hopping in here. So I'm really grateful as well for Katie and the biology team having the flipped advising practice that they did, because I came in literally last January, so I'm approaching a year of advisement, and Katie's presentation was one of the first I had watched as a new academic advisor, and I knew immediately that that was something that I wanted to be a part of, just because I have a unique advisement situation. So I advise for the entirety of the School of the Earth, Ocean, and Environment, and it is 4 distinct majors. So I advise for marine science, environmental studies, and geology. And they may sound like they have a lot of commonalities, which they do for the most part, but they are very unique and different majors. And so I know I wanted to help students be able to understand their major better and be able to do a lot of that on their own time, so that they felt prepared coming into a meeting with me. So the 2 things, or the 2 technologies that I primarily use in my practice, I do have a Blackboard module, and then I do utilize Microsoft Forms as well. So a few of the questions that I was kind of considering, if we could move to the next one. Yes. Okay, cool. So a few of the questions I was considering while building my module, I had 4 primary ones. So how do I go about organizing a learning module for 4 distinct majors? How am I going to parcel out different information and make sure it's really individualized? Because I realized very early on that I could not generalize information. It was going to have to be super specific. What information do I want and need my students to be able to readily access? Is there any major specific information, kind of going back to that first question, as well as how do I want to present the information? So I am definitely a visual learner, so I spend a lot of time thinking about how students are going to view something, if it's going to make sense to them. So I spend a lot of time working on that in my Blackboard module. So I'm actually going to go ahead and share my screen just to show you guys kind of pieces of those questions within my module. I just wanted to highlight a few things. Mine looks fairly similar to biology's, but with a few unique changes. So hopefully this will work. Katie, can you see this? Can you give me a thumbs up? Okay, cool. So this is kind of the front landing page of mine. So I currently only have 1 semester in. It took me a really long time to build. I'm hoping to have a second semester up by the spring. But this is a landing page. And so I have different folders kind of walking students through their curriculum. And then lastly, I have their fall advising worksheet. So this is where that Microsoft Forms, a lot of you have mentioned, comes into play. So something I realized that's really cool is you can actually embed a Microsoft form into Blackboard, which is kind of unique. So this is kind of at the end, and I've got some language here telling students about, this is the primary piece that I need to be able to meet with them. So it's kind of similar to what you all probably have, but at the end of their worksheet, I do expect them to have a course list prepared so that I can go over that and look at that before their appointment. Some other things that are super specific. So like I talked about, I have the different majors. So in this understanding your degree folder, I have a folder for each major. So students know that if they are, for example, a marine science major, they need to click on their folder. And then I also use Powtoon, similar to biology. So they have a Carolina core video, which each of my majors has specific core. So I had to make an individualized Carolina core video for each. They have a video on major requirements, and then they have their curriculum checklist, their major map. We have some emphases available for them. So I've got some information about that, as well as we also have the accelerated study plans. So a lot of our students utilize that. So I really wanted to make sure that they could access that information in here as well, because that is something I would want to discuss with them in our appointments. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention, if I can go back here, I also have some information about major change. And so that process kind of looks a little bit different within College of Arts and Sciences. And so a lot of times in appointments, we'll have students come in and they're like, I want to change my major. That's great. I might not be able to do that for you per se. So I created this graphic to kind of help students understand, kind of back to that visualization piece. So how can I communicate the information in the best way possible for students? I thought the flow chart might be the best way to do it, but you can also see here I've got some steps. So a lot of my modules are outlined in steps. So step 1, do this, step 2, do this, just kind of like helping them walk through instead of having them just read and regurgitate a bunch of information, because nobody really wants to like sit and read all day. So those are just a few features of my Blackboard that I think are a little bit different. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and hopefully Katie will be able to bring hers back up. But yeah, toss off to Sabrina.
So like we mentioned, we all have similar goals in our flipped advising, but they all look really different. And so I wanted to take a moment to talk about sort of the process I've taken to get to where I am, and how I had to sort of section what I was going to focus on so that I could build content that I was comfortable sharing with students, and that I couldn't go from 0 to 60, and that's okay. Like I mentioned, I attended one of Katie's trainings and I was like, great, this is all the things that I've been thinking of doing, but I haven't been able to facilitate. And I had to kind of take a step back and assess, like, what had I been doing that aligned with sort of the definition of flipped advising, and then, consider where can it grow as an individual person, and then sort of building on with the team as I've kind of changed spaces. So originally, when I joined as an advisor, I was joining with 3 other fresh new advisors and one that had only been in the role for about, what was it, Francois, like 6 months? Less than a year, I believe. So there was 4 of us that were relatively new, and we were all just really focused on, what we needed to be able to successfully support our students. And I started with kind of just Outlook, honestly. It was email, sort of newsletter style information. Okay, this is a key time. This is what I'm thinking about. This is what students should be thinking about. Are they? I don't know. I'm going to send it to them. And that way they feel like they had at least a grounding place. It sort of turned into once a month was kind of where I was finding these key things. And then I think for the spring semester, I tried to map out a weekly topic. And I tried to come up with something kitschy so they would open their email. So it was on my little touch base Thursday. But again, establishing this routine of, like, if you're in classes, it's already, the schedule is planned out for you. You're going either Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday. Well, same thing. You're thinking about advising on Thursday. You're thinking about schedule planning on Thursday. You know to expect something from me, that I'm thinking about you on this day. Like, what could you be thinking about to prep? And then, of course, a lot of us do this already. So again, give yourself some credit. Lots of us have template responses because we already are anticipating the questions that we're going to get at certain key times of year. So that may be the place that you start. Over time, I developed some forms, again, borrowing some ideas from Katie's, some from the UAC resources with the pre-advising worksheet, and College of Engineering has another worksheet that I borrowed some ideas from. But the Microsoft form enables me to download information mass as the students submit them. And so I'm able to assess, what information they've captured and plan for their meeting. And I try and explain to them that, like, if I don't think very well in the moment. I'm honest with them. Like, quick thinking is not my jam. I need time to process. I need to think about the resources that I would share, and think about all of the possible answers, because as we know, students don't always develop a fully comprehensive question, and they're really thinking about 10 things and they've only asked 1. And so I recognized that there were so many appointments that I was hanging up and half an hour later going, oh my gosh, why didn't I tell them this, that, or the other? And so the forms really give me the opportunity to prepare and feel like I'm presenting the best information I have available, and also trying to establish that accountability, that they're the ones that are in control. It's not me. I'm not a guidance counselor. I'm not giving you a list of class. This is all you. This is step 1 in adulting. You're making decisions, and I want you to make mistakes because I'm here to help you fix them if they're made. And then I borrowed from Katie the Cosmo quiz. And so I have a sort of if then what if worksheet for if they're considering dropping a course. That's a common question. Students want you to sort of hold their hand, and we don't always have the time. Time is the thing that we as advisors consistently talk about. We don't have enough. So investing a little bit of time to have these resources available to them. And then this fall, I actually switched units. So I'm working with a different population of students, and I'm on a bigger team of advisors, and I had the opportunity to kind of reassess. Again, it's a new group of students. I get to establish a new routine, set new expectations. I will say, as an advisor that has a mixed caseload, I've got probably 50% freshmen, and then the other 50% are sophomores, juniors. That has been eye-opening. Obviously, as sophomores and juniors have already developed some relationships with other advisors, it's been a little bit of a culture shock to them that I'm asking them to come with information available. So I'm crossing my fingers that spring will feel a little less bumpy. But reflecting on all of my things, fall is hard, spring gets easier, because you've been able to set the expectation. But I decided that another thing we hear from students a lot is email is a little overwhelming. We know that they're getting emails from us, from their faculty for each of their courses, from their student organizations, and all of the wonderful advertising that the university finds relevant and helpful for students. So they can easily lose what I'm sending them if they're not thinking of those same things in that moment. Because again, a first year is learning, and a second or third year thinks they know things, and then they realize maybe they need additional information. So I decided to sort of plant all of my information in a Blackboard. It's using that same module system, but I don't actually have modules or activities for them to complete quite yet. It's really been what I tell my students, my brain dump. It's all of the things I'm thinking about in one place, so that if you're thinking about these things in the same moment I am, awesome, we can work through that together. But maybe I'm thinking about the master schedule got released on September 24th, and your revising appointment is until November 1st. And so you weren't really interested in looking at the master schedule back in the end of September. So that information exists there for them that they can use at any time when they're ready. But I still do the weekly hot topic, or I've changed it to hot topic, so that there is sort of this weekly touch point where I'm calling their attention to that space. So again, to sort of just establish that routine and expectation that they be working on the material as they need. We wanted to take a moment just to kind of summarize the things that have been going well, the things that we're still thinking about, and for each of us, maybe what goals we have as we continue to develop these practices. I think one of the best things after kind of talking with Katie was I can't get a whole module built the way she could, because she was working with 3 or 4 other advisors as a team to build material, and like being okay with having what I have and just trying to kind of put on paper the things that I'm still thinking about. I know as Alexa and I were building our Blackboard spaces this year, we would sit down and, you know, come up with a chart of like, these are the goals and things that we have, but we had to keep checking each other and saying, look, you're not going to get all those things, and that's okay. What's the one thing that's going to make the biggest impact? So just we may all share different things here. I know I've been able to create some time in my schedule to host some drop-in hours that I wasn't previously able to. I know that I've been able to have more developmental conversations with the students who were engaged with the tasks that I asked of them to complete a worksheet, so we could have those more individualized conversations. Instead of having to craft and create a whole email with all of the answers, I just say, hey, have you looked in Blackboard at this folder? Go 1, 2, 3. And then that's not me having to recreate the material that's, you know, answering that question. It's kind of all right there. Do y'all have other things that have been going well that you wanted to share?
I think for me, it's really been, not to be dramatic or anything, but it's been game changing for me. I feel like my conversations with my students, I get to talk about experiential learning with them and like really check in and see how they're doing and like get to ask some of the more personal questions. And I think like on both ends, they leave the appointment feeling a lot better. I leave the appointment feeling like it was productive and successful. And I mean, we're still focusing on curriculum, and I'm still checking in on them to make sure that everything is correct. But it really has made such a difference for them to be doing the work on the front end of our appointments. I would say goals for me going into the spring, just like cleaning everything up. I know Sabrina kind of hit on this a little bit, but we had kind of talked about like, okay, we want to have this out by the fall semester. Not everything is going to be perfect in the way that we would like it to be, but that's okay because we can go in and change it. So I'm looking forward to kind of cleaning things up at the end and then working on potentially a semester 2 module for the spring.
Yeah, I think to follow up on what both of you have said, it was, I mean, even for us, it was definitely like we hit the ground running with what we had, and our modules have changed every single semester. We had a completely different module system for our very first semester. It looked entirely different how it was laid out. And as we've built things, we've gone in and changed where some things sat. We added the orientation module for this past summer because we didn't have it last summer. And then it was deciding what should stay in semester 1, what belongs in orientation. Should we leave things here? Should we move them around? So it's definitely one of those things that you will consistently work on. You will consistently keep changing and updating. You'll probably eventually get to a point where you're happy with it. I think we're pretty happy with how our modules are sitting now. And it'll just be like going forward, making sure everything's still relevant, making sure that it's still speaking to the students, that it's still actually helpful. So really, like, I guess goals for us would just be like reevaluating and ensuring that everything is still useful, not only for us, but for our students, and that our students are still willing and able to access that information. So that's kind of our big thing.
So we felt like this would be a really great point for us to kind of stop, reflect, have the opportunity for you guys to ask us all questions if you have them, either posing them to the group or to any of us specifically, but also thinking about, once again, reflecting back on what you would like out of this training and going forward in your flipped advising practice. So, you know, what types of content would you like to have available to your students? Are you going to tailor your content? Are you going to make it more generalized, or do you have multiple majors like me where you need to maybe make things a little bit more specific? And then what type of technologies do you want to use in your practice? So I'm reflecting on those, but feel free to ask us any questions if you have them. And then we'll, after the conversation, we will wrap up with some kind of tips on how to get started. So you can either unmute yourself or throw them in the chat. Thanks, Mike. That's so nice.
I think one of the other things from this slide I was hoping if people are willing to share is just like, do you think that there is a digestible piece from this sort of wordsmithing, brainstorming, that you feel like you could walk away from to kind of start something? Do you feel like there's, you know, I know for me, part of getting started was like, it feels overwhelming and I don't know where to start. And I needed to build the confidence that I can start with one thing and grow it into 10. But how are you guys feeling? Is this something that you see that you can kind of integrate or develop in your practice? Is it something that, oh, I am actually doing in some way and just didn't know to call it this? Or how are people feeling after kind of thinking about the pathways that each of us took to get here?
In regards to Christina's question about in a department where there's not buy-in from management or faculty, are you able to hold students accountable? I definitely wanted to touch on that it starts with you. It may seem really tough being the one and only person who's trying to hold your students accountable, because I know we have conversations about it constantly, about how it seems like everything on campus is just getting more difficult and more difficult to keep students accountable for things that they are responsible for. So one of those things is just trying to hold them accountable in your everyday communications. And if you have students emailing you a question and you answer that question and they say, oh, well, I don't understand. If it was clear enough and you gave them the answer to begin with, then don't feel bad to respond to them and say, I answered this question here. Like, I understand if you did not understand it, but please ask me a follow-up question. But this information is here. I do a lot of just linking things, just like students to things in emails, where if it's something that they can very easily get access to, like, just here's that link, go to that. Like, it can be very easy to want to do those things for students and want to make it easier. That was definitely one of my things when I very first started, was wanting to pave the way and make it so much easier for students to do things. But the only way to actually make it easier for them is for them to understand how to do it themselves. So that would be my initial comment, would just be to start by trying to keep them accountable for the things you're asking them to do just in your interactions with them, and be open and honest with them about it and say, you need to learn how to do this because you're not always going to have me as an advisor, especially if you don't have them for all 4 years. That's something that we talk about with our students, because we have them for their first 2 and then they go to faculty, and it's a very different experience with a faculty advisor. And that's why we want them to learn all of these skills now learn how to use DegreeWorks, learn how to utilize the school website to find those resources. The other thing I might say is if you can't get too much buy-in from your upper management and like back up that way, is just do soft touch things where it's like, maybe you're not holding them entirely accountable like we have, where we might cancel their appointment if they don't do their assignment before they're supposed to come. It may be talking to them about it in the meeting if there was something you expected them to do before they got there, and just saying, hey, I sent multiple messages. I wanted to make sure you knew you were expected to do this. Did you see those messages? Did you know that those were there? Or did you forget? And then just have that conversation. Because some of them, again, it's just overload of information and they may have just like missed it among everything else. Some of them, it's obviously lots of responsibilities and they have just forgotten. And some of them just blatantly decided not to do it. And those are the students you're really going to want to try and hone in on and say, well, this is an expectation. It's not much that I'm asking you to do. It's just here to help you. But that would be my advice. I'm sure Alexa and Sabrina probably have their own, and Megan too. But that's what I would say to that.
Yeah, I can build on this a little bit, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when you guys started in biology, it was a strongly encouraged, suggested, but there was no sort of actual consequence, if we want to use that harsh word. And over time, y'all have been able to develop like that expectation as a hard line, and like, nope, we asked you to do this, and so you're going to need to come prepared, and we're not going to see you. I know, to kind of go back to Chris's original question, I've had to walk through that a little bit just because I started as an individual practice, was going to try and develop it further in my team. And then I made the choice to change spaces, which has just been a new, again, learning new people and seeing what other people's practices already are. So I had to edit my boundary. In my perfect type A world, I would cancel their appointment and think that you're just being ridiculous and not participating. But I had to kind of dial that back and take what the similar approach to what Katie was saying. And it is kind of, once I check in and establish some general rapport in a conversation, I'm like, hey, so here's what the email said, and I pull it up so they can see it. And here's where you got it time 1, 2, 3, and 4. Like, tell me how you missed it. Give me some feedback. Why were you not able to complete this? You're able to get your classwork done for your class. Like, how come this fell short? To also try and evaluate, like, is what I'm asking too much? Did they not? Was it something that was miscommunicated? I think is terribly clear, and for them, whatever reason, it wasn't. And again, like I had mentioned, just sort of reiterating to them in the moment of like, see how this is something that I could have like had ready, or see how we could have gotten further, or like, oh, I know you were interested in study abroad, but because we have to focus on your spring classes, like we won't have to wait for that, and so we might not have the best developed plan for study abroad. But you just have to sort of make those choices in the moment. There was one other thing, but I lost it.
Sabrina, can I jump in?
Yeah.
And you can let me know if you remember what you're going to say. I just really wanted to highlight what Marissa was saying. As somebody who openly has anxiety, the whole thing, I was just like, I get overwhelmed more of the start. I need to start something, and once I start, I can go from it. But trying to figure out how to do an entire Blackboard in terms of modules was a huge, overwhelming task thinking about that. So you are not alone in that feeling. I think what Mike said, having a buddy, like if I had not had Sabrina to sit down with and be like, let's just brain dump. Let's just get something on there. Like if you can just get 1 or 2 things on there and get the ball rolling, it really starts to come together on its own, I would say. Sabrina, I don't know if you would relate to this. Yes. Yeah. So I don't know. I think that you just have to give yourself a lot of grace of knowing that, 1, it's not going to be perfect the first time. 2, that plugging away at it is okay. I was telling the girls before that it took me, I think, like 5 months of just like chipping away to get my Blackboard all set up. And so we're all here to help and assist and be on your team. And so we really want to help you guys get started, which I think leads us into kind of the last slide. So we all really wanted you to have something that you could really take away from this presentation. So if you want to like screenshot this or take a photo of it, this is kind of what we thought of like the how to get started 101. So we kind of hit on this already, but step one, brainstorming either alone or with a buddy. Obviously, we recommend the buddy approach, but keeping a running or an editable document. So some of us use OneNote, Google Docs. But just having that brainstorm and kind of brain dumping what you would like, either your Blackboard module or whatever you're using to kind of look like. The second step would be building your Blackboard, which is actually so much easier than I thought it would be. Thanks to Jane for showing me and walking me through that process. But you essentially like request one through IT's website. So I have the website here, and then you like order a Blackboard and you can pick the name, and then adding students, that's kind of something you do on your own, but they're super quick turnaround about having your Blackboard built and ready for you. And then you don't have to make it public to anyone. So you can play around with it as long as you would like. Step three, thinking about that assessment piece. So what are you going to do to hold students accountable? Are you going to use a Microsoft form? Are you going to use a Google form? Are you going to use a Blackboard quiz? This is a piece that I spent a lot of time thinking about because I wanted to be really intentional about it. And then the fourth step being communication. So I'm actually going to adapt what Sabrina, kind of similar to what Sabrina is using, because I think it's really great to continue to send students to that space. So how are you doing that? Are you using emails to do that? Are you using EAB to check in or touch base with your students? So these are kind of like the 4 steps that we think would be most useful of kind of jump starting your thinking process. But overall, we're just really glad that y'all joined in on our training today, and we have more time for any questions if y'all have them.
Thank you. Thank you all for participating in the chat as well. We know virtual is not always the most ideal space to learn, but we appreciate when you can be reflective in this space with us. Again, we're happy to continue the conversation as time goes on. Reach out to us. Mike is describing the communities of practice. Those are just ways as advisors that we get involved to kind of check in about how things are going. So if you want a little bit more of that buddy system, we're all kind of around to help out with that. But I know that Sarah also put the feedback requests further up in the chat. So if you all do want to fill out that for us as well, we'd super appreciate it so we can know how to help better serve you all and our peers in the future as well. All of our contact info is here, so if you want to reach out one-on-one, you're welcome to do that as well. Obviously, we're all undergraduate academic advisors, so if you do have a different perspective, we would love to hear that as well as people outside of the UAC. So yeah, thank you all for coming.
Francois, I'm glad you were able to come too. We're finding that it is convenient for a lot of people, so we're happy that we're able to still offer the hybrid option and have productive trainings like this one. These ladies are way too humble about themselves and all that they've done. I'm pretty sure they could go to bat with any other university and be doing more than anyone. So maybe a little bit less than George Steele, who's like the flipped advising guru, but just a little bit less. Thank you guys so much for coming and participating. And of course, thank you to our presenters and all the hard work you're doing. You're very appreciated.
Thank you all.
Bye, thank you.